Live. Live.
Let's see if we can find it.
That's cool.
I'm running from South Korea.
Oh, well, hello.
Hello.
Good
How's it going, guys?
evening. Ah, you might want to turn that
Yeah, I'm
sound
turning
down.
the volume off on this one.
Hi from Virginia. Thanks, guys, for
Yeah,
coming.
how's it going, guys?
Guys. Hey, guys. Hello, it's going good. How are you all? We're good.
Yeah, we're
Good.
doing well.
Doing it
This is
good.
kind of a spontaneous, just, I don't know, we thought we'd go with it and zero thought. We're just kind of making it work, so. If you hear some Disney music in the background or a small child running around or the camera just gets incredibly shaky, it's probably our toddler is coming up and
Hi,
saying hello.
Lisa. It's good to see you. Going good. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Lifestyle with Nicole Powers. That's cool. I like that our names are kind of similar.
Well, good. So what are you guys up to tonight? We just kind of thought we'd just join in and just kind of have a little chit chat and just kind of see what you guys are all up to this evening and just
So cute.
Just go from there.
Aw, that's awesome. Yeah, so we went to church today. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And just been hanging out. We cleaned. We gave the baby a bath.
Yeah.
And
We had like a week of grooming everybody. So we had to get both of our bunnies we had to shave one of them and groom the other one and then we had our showers ourselves and gave a baby a bath tonight. So it's just been a bit of a day of washing.
you know what would be fun is if we introduced him to a bunny.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Let
I'll
me
go.
grab a bunny. Okay, you get back. Come here, Chip.
Yeah.
Okay, so we understand that not everybody gets to have bunnies in their house, but we do.
Yeah.
So, this is Jessie. He's a sweet bunny.
Yeah, Bubba.
Oh,
You trying to feed it a sucker?
Does anybody else have bunnies? We have two. We have this one, and then we have a lop-eared. And they're adorable and super fun to have as house pets. He's a little camera shy. His foot just shook.
Yes.
The little camera shy. Oh, that's a cutie. I know. He's adorable. He's so sweet, too. Like, just a crazy gentle bunny. Yeah, we were grooming them yesterday, and one of them, she'll kind of, like, nip at you, and then, like, he would never.
Yeah.
Oh, my kids want one and a pig. Totally. Yeah, bunnies are awesome house pets. They're litter box trained. Like, their setup's really easy. And so the bunny's the way to go. You'll never regret getting a bunny. You'll just regret the bunny you didn't get.
Yeah.
And then we got this little one here. Pretty looking cray-cray.
Say hi.
What's their diet like? They eat like 90% hay and then treats. And I say treats, I mean like they love banana, grapes, blueberries, lettuce, carrots. Bunny was my first pet I had for 7 years. Oh, I know, right? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to look. You should look into it. It's super fun. Yeah, the Chessie, the one that you guys just met, he was flown in, so he was an imported bun. And he was 7 weeks old, and so he came in like this little McDonald's looking type box. It was so cute. And I remember the first night I had him, I really was wondering, like, did I make a good choice here?
Mm-hmm.
Because he was just a wily little bun. He was like roaming everywhere, and I was like, but we worked it out. Oh wow. Hello, dear.
Yeah, it ended up being one of those things where I'd always like, because I was raised with a bunch of dogs, like 30 dogs through my childhood, like just a ton of, like we had fleets of dogs, like we had them come in like pairs of 5 or 7 at a time. So it was something that whenever we had a bunny, like there was 0% chance we ever had a bunny like growing up, but
you always secretly wanted one?
I did, and so now it's kind of fun because like as a prey animal, these two really suck at being prey animals because you can catch them all the time. And so we'll just have them run through the living room and reach down and just grab a bunny. And every once in a while, like while she was in the bedroom the other day, like Chessie came up and was hung out with me on the couch for a while and came up 3 times. He'd never admit to it, but it is something that he came up a couple different times. So
yeah,
it's always fun being able to play with bunnies anytime you want to.
Hey, I like this high wife style fam.
How's it going, guys?
This is so fun. I love lives. They're a good time. But yeah, bunnies are awesome. Yeah, they are so much fun. I like Chessie's been amazing. And then Sunny, so Sunny is his kingdom spouse, if we want to be real about it. Because we knew that, God bless you too, we knew he needed a wife. And so we went to go to like the Humane Society because they apparently have like a bunny room. And while we were waiting for them to open, we went to, what's that pet store called?
Petland.
Petland. And if any of y'all have been to a Petland, you know they don't give anything away for free. Like these are bougie animals with like super expensive. They gave her to us, like this little bunny. And we brought her home. And he's like, I don't know if he likes her because he was really aggressive towards her. And he's really sweet. And I was like, no, give it time. And then she knew that like that was her kingdom bun. Yeah. And so she would, every time he would get aggressive, she would lower herself down and she would submit.
Yeah, she's really sweet.
It was biblical, y'all. It was so cute. Yeah, it was. It was so biblical. So it took like 5 days of her like submitting. And I was like, no, he's falling so in love with her. Yeah. Because she knows what she has to do. Right? Yeah. Yeah, no.
It really was.
Yeah, it was like we were watching this thing play out, and then he fell madly in love with her. Yeah. He did. Yeah. And like they have been like
they're inseparable.
They're inseparable. They lay on each other, they groom each other, they kiss all the time. It's pretty cute stuff. Yeah. So
I can go get Sunny here in a second, but we just shaved her the other day, so she looks like she's
she's a Proverbs 31 bunny.
She looks like she's in her wilderness season right now,
does.
but it's okay. They're already way past that. It's just something that occasionally we have to shave this one because it's just
long-haired bunnies.
Absolutely like it's unmaintainable. Like there's no way of maintaining this bunny otherwise. So
that's so
we go
fun.
get Sunny.
Yeah. That's funny how it works. I know, it's so cute because like animals need, you know, their mate as well. And we knew he was at that point where it was like he was ready to be a husband. Okay, here comes Sunny. She's so pretty. But yeah, we have to shave her down, and so she looks kind of rough, but she's beautiful.
We'll give her a good side.
Oh my goodness. Sweet. She's got the prettiest colors.
Yeah.
A little broken orange. I think she's a broken orange, but she could be like, the coloring might actually be different. I know. She's beautiful. Yeah, when they brought her out and they're like, we'll give her to you, I was like, what? And then Dalton and I like held her up and Dalton's like, yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, put her in the cart. I love her. It's giving Ginger. Totally. She might be a broken Ginger. That would be
broken Ginger.
I mean, she's sweet. And then when we first got her, she would just purr. So if you guys have ever heard a bunny purr, it's like when they're like in bunny bliss and they purr, like just make this little chatter. And she would only do it for him.
Yeah, it's my little sweetheart.
It's pretty cute.
Yeah, she's got now.
Oh, she's like, Daddy, right?
Yeah, she's a little daddy's bun.
Yeah.
She's a little feisty thing, but, you know, it's fine.
We've got these cute little, like, headbands that we'll put on her, and they have, like, bows on them. And it's pretty cute. She hasn't rocked a headband in a while, but... So, funny story about Sunny. So, we live in Missouri, and we went to Branson, Missouri. Rabbits are high maintenance. Kind of, but not really. Once you get
this
them,
one's more so than the other one for sure.
but as she gets older, it should get better. Just their fur is wily when they're younger, and then it actually it gets better. But it's just a grooming aspect. But yeah. So we go to Branson one weekend, and we stayed at the Hilton on the Landing. Y'all probably don't know what that is, and that's okay. But anyway. And so we have to bring her because she had GI stasis. And if anybody knows,
she was not doing well.
She was not doing well. She came down with it like that day, and so we knew we had to take her with us. And so we sneak her into the hotel. We put her in the car seat, like the stroller.
Yeah.
And we put her little cabin cruiser, so it's like her hay and all of her stuff. And we put her in there. And we take her, we keep her in the bathroom, we nursed her back to health, we tried to get her into a vet, like we had to just bring her with us. So we get her to a good spot, and she's fine by the time we're leaving. So we pack up, put her cabin cruiser, everything, we leave the hotel. We go down, we go to eat. And then the hotel calls us, and they're like, hey, you left your bunny.
Yeah, you left a bunny in the room, and there was a part of me that was initially
no.
trying to deny a bunny.
You're like, what? That's so weird.
Where did a bunny? I don't know what bunny you're talking about, but then I realized no, this is something we actually have to tell them that we didn't pay a pet deposit. We didn't tell anybody about the fact that we were bringing a bunny last moment, and they're like, well, we had one of our workers give her a salad or something, but. If you could just come by and pick it up, that'd be great. And our key cards, at this point, don't work, so I had to walk in,
Delaney,
I had to leave and walk in with her cabin, her cabin cruiser through the front entrance, and they're like, yeah, she's still up in your room. I'm like, okay, well, can you activate a key card for me for just a second so I can go up and retrieve our mystery bunny? And we go up there, and underneath the bathroom counter. This wily looking thing.
We packed up all of her stuff. We just didn't pack her up.
Yeah.
It was hysterical.
Yeah, she's pretty quiet, so it's you don't really ever hear them. It's
so you can imagine what that cleaning lady was going through when she looks over.
Yeah, just a massive white fluffy rat flying through the room.
It was funny. I laughed till I cried. I could not tell that story for months because it was just so unreal that we did that.
Yeah,
everything worked out, thank God.
Yeah.
But it was funny. But yeah, so that's Sunny.
Sunny.
Hello, Kingdom Couple. Oh, hello.
There you go, son. Have a good day.
Yeah, we still have to do more. Oh, sweet girl.
Yeah, she's getting around a lot better though.
Yeah. We gotta do more. She's like the grooming that just never ends.
No.
You groom her and then you look and you're like, yeah, we've got to work on that more.
Yeah. Every time that we do it, we're like, we should really probably do this a little bit more often, but we don't. So
yeah,
we just don't.
Yeah,
it's always good intentions.
You always have a lot going on, right? So you got kids and life, and then you're like, and we need to groom the bunnies. How old is she? Sunny's 2?
2.5, yeah, 2, something like that. So pretty young. Chessie is about 5. Yeah,
he turned 5 in October.
Yeah, he's a little bit more seasoned.
He has papers. He's pedigreed, and so we have the list of his lineage, and it's hysterical.
Yeah, if you've ever seen a lineage of anything AKC registered, it's all these regal names. Well, Chessie has one too, and the names on there are hilarious. Because it was
satin and lace,
his grandma. And burlesque and
what's his dad's name? Hondo,
Hondo and
so we just pull out his papers every once in a while,
go back
just read
6
through
generations, which is in bunnies terms is a month and a half.
Yeah.
But he's pretty funny stuff.
That's awesome. so you're just watch the introduction to the Courts of Heaven. I keep telling people that I coach that we're going to do more on Courts of Heaven, which we are. We're just kind of playing around in this live situation.
Yeah, we're having fun this season.
Yeah, we're also going to do a coaching giveaway, but it's not tonight. But we're going to do that probably this week, so be looking out for that.
Sure.
And we need to do more Courts of Heaven stuff because I feel I don't know, I just feel some people receive certain things from other people better, right? So like who we learned from, like some people I've talked to, like they're just like, and it's also too like sometimes in certain seasons you will not get something, right? And then like all of a sudden you have like an understanding for it and it makes sense to you and it's coming from a voice that like you can get. So yeah, no, we need to do that. I'm sorry we haven't done that yet.
Yeah. No,
Could talk about it a little bit
sure.
now.
Yeah, like I said, we're not really any restrictions or anything. So if you guys have certain questions about it, like not really rules, if you guys have any questions, just go for it. We'll just,
I feel like he does
go
really
right for
good.
it.
I feel like he does really good with courts of heaven. I'm getting better at explaining it.
Sure.
Pretty proud of myself. Yeah, so when you pray in the courts of heaven in our one-on-one, he shows me and guides me. Think, oh,
yeah, definitely.
That's so good.
Yeah, it's something that courts of heaven was really a breakthrough, really a big one.
Huge.
For the way that we actually thought about praying, and for people that never really thought about like what the courts of heaven is. I mean, kind of the way that I describe it to people is that, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a doctor, I've got all these different hats, I'm a friend. And so each one of those times that I'm putting on that hat, I'm talking in a different authority, or I'm coming in a different way. And so whenever Krista approaches me and talks with me about
I'm like, stop, home slice.
Yeah, that home slice. I mean, that's going to be a whole different reaction than when my kids are coming to me. And it's going to be a whole different question than when I'm at the clinic. And so it's kind of like, do you pray for your food and bless your food in the same intensity that you would for if you were praying for healing for cancer? I don't know, maybe how aggressively you bless your food, but I mean, it's something that's like, there is a little bit of a difference in the way that we think about it. And when we talk about the courts, we're saying that, God has a different way that we kind of approach him sometimes. And it's just because he's got all of these different titles and names. And so when we approach him as Father, it's something that's relational. Like when we're approaching as a friend, it's something that's conversational. And when we're approaching it as Judge, we're asking for God basically to rule in our favor, or to try and find out any legal rights that are present that may be holding up the current situation. And we found a lot of breakthrough that happened when we just made that small switch of saying that there may be a part of this that is legal in nature, and if that's the case, then we would like to cancel all of the legal aspects against that and basically approach this in a legal way. And it was something that whenever we had heard about it from Robert Henderson, and that was pretty much the only resource that we had outside of our church that was acting in it, that her daughter's playing on the tripod, but Robert Henderson in our church was one of the only areas where we had any influence with it. So whenever we approach it, it's just a way that we've just turned it into a normal way of praying now. We've seen a lot of breakthrough happen in our lives. Hey, Delaney.
She likes to play in between
She's like,
the couch and the tripod.
She's like, I am gonna fit myself in between.
It's cute though, because she does that to me. Like I'll be doing dishes or getting ready, and she was like, it's between me and the counter.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of what she does. But yeah, that's awesome. No, so it's Krista with a C. Somebody wrote that and I did this. But yeah, no, so yeah, tons of breakthrough in that area. But I like the way that you explain it as coming in on different authorities with like the different hats that you wear, because I think that's a really awesome way to kind of break down what that looks like. Addressing God as Father, friend, or just Judge. It was funny because a few months ago, I felt like God wanted me to come in and address him as Father, and I never do that. I always go into the courts, and I'm always like, I want to talk with the just Judge, because I got things I got to handle. And I went in, and as soon as I said that I wanted to talk to him as Father, I felt the entire atmosphere shift, and it was just like, it was crazy, because he was there, right? And he met me there, like in that relationship.
Yeah.
And it was very powerful, and it was just awesome. It was neat because when you're praying, obviously, like we pray by faith, right? Like we ask God and we commune with him by faith. Like it's just a thing of where it's like, that's the only way this thing happens because you can't see him, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it's interesting when you feel him leading you to do something and you do it, and then he meets you there, and you really feel that tangible presence, and you're just like, oh, and it feels warm and it feels fuzzy,
Yeah.
and you're like, yes. And so, kind of just an example of addressing him in those different relationships. Like he just wanted me to come in and like have a daddy daughter talk with him,
Yeah,
you know.
of course.
And it was really cool. And I just remember like in that session with him, like I just talked to him, and that he just wanted me to experience that with him, like and just come in and just talk, like, you know, I'm father right now.
Yeah. And then we had a question there. It said, I think we missed it there. It said, do you still pray warfare prayers when you pray the courts of heaven prayers? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
We pray almost exclusively all of our warfare prayers from a legal aspect now. We have probably for about the last 2 years, and that's something that if we have something identifiable that comes up, anything that we can actually identify a root cause or a spiritual cause with it, we're going to come at it from a legal aspect. And it's not that it's something that any of the other prayers or effectiveness and things like that haven't worked previously for us. This is just something that's shown the most fruit in our lives. And so when we actually have an issue where someone asks us to pray for them, we are generally coming into the courts. We're canceling generational curses. We are seeking for deliverance. We're breaking habitual sin. We're trying to do everything that we can to come out of agreement with anything that has authority to be able to show up in that way and manifest in that way. So when we're doing our spiritual warfare, if we have a problem or an issue in our lives, or we're seeking it immediately or suddenly, you know, for an answer, we're coming at it from courts of heaven in that side of things. And it's just more of the way of how we actually, any of the prayer lifestyles that we have now, it's something that we're coming at it from that kind of direction now, and that's just something that's really, it's been a big deal
Like
for us.
once you find what really works, because I know it's interesting how some of the things you will struggle with the most will be the things you will be most anointed in,
Yeah.
or have it's because you're gonna have such a breakthrough in it, and I feel like God wants to take you kind of the long way, because he wants you to search, right? And like also, you know, maybe being shy to pray in front of people, or maybe prayer having been a struggle for you at one point, but you always feel compelled to keep trying.
Yeah.
That's gonna be an area that God is gonna anoint you in, and he's going to elevate you in. And that's kind of what happened with me. I used to like hate praying in front of people.
First year of our marriage, she's like, I'm gonna go in the bedroom and pray by myself.
I prayed all the time, but I would go and pray by myself.
I'm gonna go do it by myself.
I felt weird because
she does it professionally.
Because he prays so beautifully. Like he says all the right things, and like it's real romantic and sexy, and I'm like, oh Lord, I need your help. You know, mine was just always like, God, please help. You know, mine was more of like begging God for help and answers and, you know, direction, and, you know, mine was just different. I just wasn't there yet. And so I felt weird. Like I just felt like I was going to be judged for like not praying super pretty, you know, not always having the right words to say, but just saying what I felt like was happening. You know,
yeah. But I mean, like, you know, like every single day that we were even dating, even engaged in that part of it, we spent every single day together, and we spent at least one point in time of the day, like praying together collectively. But it was something that's like, it wasn't, you know, do you want to lead this, you know, do you want to lead us in, or what do you want to do, or any of that kind of stuff. We just both naturally did it. And then there were kind of seasons where it was like, do you want to pray for us? And she's like, no. No, I don't.
Well, you know, also the thing is you have to look back and see that there were seasons of time where God was doing such big things in us that like everything felt weird, right? Like, I don't know if any of you guys can understand that, but like when you look back in some of your darkest, like, you know, almost like wildernessy seasons, but it was like God was doing something, and so you felt so stretched in every area that everything just felt uncomfortable.
Sure.
That was some of those, and it was like you feel like you're dying, but you actually know that it's just beginning. And so I think for me, I think for both of us, and some of that stuff was just like God was just doing stuff. He was shaping us. He was pulling things out. He was putting things in, and it just ended up being where it was like sometimes you're just like, I don't even know what to do. I don't even know what to do. But I know I don't have any pretty words for it, And so you're just like, somebody pray us out of this one.
Sure.
No. Did we?
Yeah, we had a question that was I'm in a similar situation. How did you pray to be the wife for him, and also how did you ask for insight that gave you peace in waiting in the Lord's timing?
Totally fun. So there I was. No. So I think. So how did I pray to become your wife?
Yeah.
Is that what that said?
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, I didn't.
How did you pray for peace in the waiting?
Yeah, peace in the waiting was, well, the first go around, I didn't have peace. I had turmoil and I had to be healed. So when God first said, "That's your husband," because nothing happened, and because I felt such a shift happen in the opposite direction, like as soon as I got that, I was like, nothing was happening, but like I had just seen him, like not at church, and like things were weird, right? And then God tells me that, and then I see him, and then it was like you could feel like just the atmosphere shift where it went from like nothing really happening to like polar, like just super nothing happening. Hey. Oh, we're going on for something. Yeah. Oh, hey. And so, yeah, so I didn't have peace when that happened. I felt crushed because I think one of the things where we can get tripped up is timing, right? So whenever God told me that's your husband, I just assumed we would start dating the next week. So when that didn't happen, I slowly kind of did like a little bit of a downward spiral as far as like not understanding. I guess I just didn't get the assignment. And so when things went the other way and weren't going in that direction at all, I felt rejected. Just because nothing was happening. And so then a few months later, God told me, he didn't reject you, I hid your value from him. And then I was like totally healed and I felt great and I forgot about it and I moved on and I just kept doing what I'd been doing. And I just thought it was off. I thought he changed his mind. So I was like, oh, okay, cool, because that felt horrible. So I'm good to just like not do this, And then when he said, you're getting married soon, that spring, so the initial word came in the fall, and then that spring he said, you're getting married soon. And I was like, to that, same one. So once God said that, then God started speaking to me about it a lot. And when I would ask a question, he would respond. And so I really didn't have time to feel uneasy about it. Like I didn't have time to not have peace. I had perfect peace because God was very active in it with me. And I knew where we were going. I did not know the time, but I knew that God was going to get us there. And so I just had all my faith in the Lord. I was doing my best to wait well. So I was like working out, I was eating right, I was cleaning my house, I was taking care of things, I was getting my brother moved into his house, and it was just a thing where it was a really busy, fun season, and there was just a lot of excitement. Hi, God's chosen 7. So I hope that answers your question. It was probably the long way around, but what else do we have, babe?
I'm trying to think too. Delaney kicked the phone here.
Oh, so. Sure. So, baby donkey kicks. Can you not get it back?
No.
Okay, that's all right. There it goes.
It is.
Hey Elizabeth. What's up, girl?
I had a question about spirit spouse things. Did you take that to the course, and do you still get attacked, or did you still get attacked afterwards?
Yeah, I did a little bit. Sometimes there are just things you kind of have to work through with the Lord. And I just got to a really great level with all of that stuff. So thank you, Jesus. But yeah, no, I think that would be a good one for you to answer,
Sure.
babe.
You know,
How would you handle a spirit spouse in the courts of heaven?
now versus whenever I actually knew, didn't even know it was a thing.
Look at your mama.
Sorry, we play this game where we've got this yellow fluffy ball, and then she flies across the room, and then we actually chuck it at her face. It's just kind of how we parent. But yeah, so there are a lot of these things that I didn't realize I was actually a part of. She got it right in the back. I didn't realize I was actually a kingdom spouse until I was one. I didn't realize the whole thing about a spirit spouse until it was something that we dealt with one. And, by the time that we actually figured out kind of like what that was, it was just something that I didn't actually have a name for it. It was just something that, there was those times whenever you'd wake up and you'd be tormented, in the middle of the night, or you'd have bad dreams, and they'd be never ending. You'd have them day after day or week after week, or you'd end up having these parts where you're waking up and just like kind of instantly repenting for things that happened in your dream while you were unconscious, essentially.
Do you think that was what you were dealing with when that was going on?
I mean, who knows? I mean, there's probably a portion of it. I mean, it's something that's like
It makes
sense. I've had those kind of experiences kind of previously, and it was just something that I never really thought about it. It was just something that I kind of just chalked up to a weird nightmare or some kind of experience in that sense, but I never really put like a name to it until it was something we found out more about, kind of like what spirit spouses were, in that sense, and the legal right that they had to kind of be there. But whenever it was something that, by the time that we had a name for it, we already had a tool to be able to basically fight against it. And in both of those cases, it was something that, we had to make a choice of like, is this something that we actually address? Is this something that we just kind of let it, leave it go? And because, I mean, there is a part of like a shame aspect, a little bit of it that kind of comes up whenever those things happen, that you're like, I don't know really how to kind of talk with anybody about this. I don't really know what kind of, it's just kind of like a weird experience that you're like, I don't know if this is something that's actually going to have any fruit benefiting me talking about any of this versus actually just being something that just kind of moving on. But no, the part with the spirit spouse is just something that's like when we started looking at kind of soul ties, like what soul ties look like, because in a lot of those encounters, they don't always have to have identities or like features that are identifiable. It's something that's just can be it can just be kind of like a very disturbing experience all around. That it's kind of hard to piece together like where some of those things kind of come from, and so in the courts of heaven, we just kind of had to kind of take more of a generalized approach of just breaking off any soul tie that we could imagine and think of from any encounter, relationship, experience, anything that we had kind of previously that had a legal right to be there.
Yeah.
And I don't really know if there's like a specific time of saying that, oh, it was just this one thing that ended up making those experiences kind of go away. But in the intention of going after them each individually, we just kind of collectively just knocked it out, and it wasn't something that we really dealt with since. So
yeah, so that brings up a thought. So it's interesting though, because I remember what he's talking about, and it's funny because sometimes you don't know what's going on in that moment, but you look back and you're like, oh, okay, now I see everything for exactly like kind of what that was. And when we first started dating, I remember the first time like he invited me like over to his house, and we'll answer that in just a second. Yeah, no, we'll answer that in just a moment. Sure. Yes. And the first time that I came over to his house, I remember I left crying because the warfare was so intense. There was so much stuff here that was like not okay, and it did not want me here. And so I think that's an interesting thing that I've shared with a few of the people I coach with, like just because it made sense to talk to them about it. But yeah, so we actually ended up, and so we talked on the phone after I left, because I left in tears, and I was just like, yeah, we're gonna have to anoint the house and pray over it, because there is a lot going on there. And it was just a thing of where like I just felt so unwelcomed and I felt so uneasy. And it wasn't because of him, it was just from past stuff and just like curses, I think, that were put on it, words that were spoken out against it, against him, you know, and all of that was just like manifesting. And honestly, I think he probably did still have a spirit spouse at that point. I absolutely think you did. And I think that's part of why now you look back and you can see it. Yeah. And I don't know what I had, because I know I had been delivered of that before we got together, but there was definitely still some stuff there that started kind of manifesting itself in dreams and stuff. But hey, Jessica. Don't know if we're talking about since I just hopped on by. Hi. So yeah, no, it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, there, because somebody had mentioned in the comments, like, was there a lot of warfare leading up to? There was. My life was just warfare. His life was just warfare, for sure. I think him and I both went through a time, mine happened before his, where it was like, everything in your life turns on you to kill you. Mm-hmm. Because it's the enemy's last chance to completely destroy you, discredit you, and dismantle you before you actually step into what God has for you. And so I went through that before, and then he went through it after, but we both went through it. And it's this distinctive thing of where everyone just, all the true colors come out, right? And all the demons come out, and everything gets assigned to you at once to say, we're going to take you down.
Familiar spirits are a pain in the rear. Because they show up in every single person who has open doors in their lives. Like, this stuff just kind of pops up, and it's like, you know, the whole part where you're like, well, you can't have, you know, a Christian be, you know, oppressed or possessed or any of those other kind of discussions that kind of happen. Like, I need to tell you, like, the 3 weeks leading up to our wedding was wild.
It was insane.
It
really was.
Absolutely wild. The stuff that was just showing its head and, like, making an absolute scene and mess. Like, mess. And to the point that, you know, we had to move her out of the house that she was in 3 weeks before our wedding date.
Which is funny because we've actually never talked about this, but I love it because so we can, and we probably should. I've definitely thought about it before. How should we pray for his? We will get right back to that in just a moment. But no, it's a thing of where all hell broke loose, like what he said, like right before. And it was sad because it came from the inside. It came from people that were friends.
It was the landlord situation that it was.
And it was the church. It was people within our church. And it was a really hostile environment. It was really crazy because it, you know, there'll be people who they're happy when you're where they are. And then when God does something really miraculous and he does something really big for you, you will see that every person who has an open door is about to get used. Because whatever they have going on in them that is not okay with this is going to be magnified, right? And so, we saw very ugly things come out of a lot of people, and we literally were like racing to the altar to just get married.
It was
before
intense.
Something stopped it. And if I could go back, I would have done things so different. That we should. I feel like him and I had both been through so much that we both did have a pretty good fear of people going on. We did, because we had both been through hell and we had fought all the fights, right? And we were just trying to like.
Had this been the first one, it would have probably broken us. But this was like, we're way farther into this part of it that it was like, just actually the physical legal implications of like kind of how this thing whole played out. I mean, it was like I haven't dealt with like people like this and just in my entire life. And you know, the landlord comes in, pulls stuff off the walls, goes through drawers,
put a
like,
bunch of stuff in my
pulled
shed.
everything
But I
in the
had
shed,
cleaned
like
my
out
shed.
into the middle of
It's
the
my
driveway.
yeah, it's my shed. It's my shed. It's my shed, and I had it all clean and organized because I'm getting married.
Yeah.
And she comes in and she takes a bunch of stuff. I'm not going to get down to the nitty gritty because I'm not going to, you know.
We'll keep it vague
it feels
enough.
nitpicky, but
We'll
it was a thing where
man.
we could have called the cops for breaking and entering.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it was, I think. I don't know. But it's something to that. Whatever it was, it wasn't right. And we actually never told anyone what happened.
No.
We
Even
were
our rabbi was
we were asked about it, and we should have spoke up and at least said that what this person did, and we were instructed not to, and we obeyed. Me being me and knowing what I know, when somebody asks you, did something happen, and you know it was really wrong, you should always give your
You
piece.
should always be.
Because they continued to do those things for like 2 years after, where they would lie about us and they would do all these things, and they just tried so hard to
They formed an army of people that they would tell their side of the story to, and we never said anything.
And they never wanted to know our side.
They never asked us, but there was like an entire like sect of the church itself that was like thinking that we were just these absolute
jerks,
just demonic filled jerks.
Yeah.
And
But
we're like,
the thing is whenever you see that level of stuff happening, and nobody stops to say, maybe that's not true, you know, you just end up seeing not just the demonic access that is there, but you also see the character, right? And then you realize one day you don't want anything to do with most of these people anyway.
Yeah. And
that was kind of where we ended up just growing extremely thick skins.
Right.
And just realizing that what those things look like, you just want absolutely nothing to do with.
Yeah. So there was a question about it saying, looking back, would y'all have kept your marriage more private? Our engagement was 40 days. The only people we invited were church members and like immediate family members. But
should we have, if I could do it again, I wouldn't have gotten married at our church.
No, it wouldn't have. But
we would have went and we would have been open and honest, and had they not wanted us to be married there, we would have went somewhere else. And we really, really wanted to be married there because that's where our love story began.
It's where our story was, and it's where we do actually go as far as
and we love it, and everything's good. The thing is you don't have to. If people want to believe lies, let them.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like, let them.
Yeah.
And you have to get to a place where you are so okay walking into a room and people snarling at you.
Yeah.
Because that's your problem.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with us. Yeah. You know, if people are just have itching ears and they want to think whatever horrible things this person's saying, even though at some point if you think through them, it probably doesn't match up with what you actually know of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a thing of where you're like, you know, so you just, you see all the flaws, you see all the stuff, you see how hateful they act, and you're like, I'm just glad I'm not you, and I'm glad I don't act that way. Yeah. But if we could do it different, we would have been open and honest, and if they didn't want to marry us, we would have been like, cool, we'll go elope.
Yeah, and it's okay. But it's a part where it's like, there was a part where there were probably things that did have to happen in the way that we don't understand it in that way, but it was something that and like I said, this is the first time that we've
never talked about
it, and it's been going on 3 years here where it's like never been a story that's really come up, never been asked about, never really it's not something that it's just kind of like in that spot where we're just kind of just candidly chatting about it.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy when you actually say it out loud.
Yeah, it's not from a place of still being hurt and unhealed from it.
No.
It was just something that's sometimes there's some pretty crazy stuff that happens that, you get a promise. Hey, that's awesome. You get together, that's awesome. You get the promise working working in that direction. You set a date. You don't tell pretty much anybody. And there's still some way. There's still some way that this kind of stuff is really going to come in and say how much of how many resources that the enemy had to use to kind of get to that spot of it and try and wreck things and break things down.
To the point that when we did our marriage counseling, the person that was doing these things was there every time.
Yeah.
She wasn't in the room, but there would be no vehicles in the parking lot but her truck.
Yeah.
And
Empty
then she
parking lot.
would be calling them as they're counseling us. It was weird. It was weird. It was just a thing where it's like, this is supernatural. This is not a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not. It really isn't even a personal thing in that part of it. Because the thing is that when we're still showing up for our feasts, when we're still showing up on the times that we're there, they're there.
Yeah.
This is them. It's not like this was there and it's gone. Like
It's forever there.
it's forever here, and it's like it's a spot where you're like, well, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna just choose to kind of like make this part of it as something that like you never go back to, or you know, if God still has a part for us being there, are you gonna allow them to kind of like take that territory? In our case, the answer is no.
Yeah.
But we're just very selective on like, you know, sometimes when we are having to go to church and that part of it, we do have some walls that are up, and that's okay. But it's not because it's more out of just like self-preservation and safety, more so than actually like trying to kind of be defensive and, you know.
Yeah, because what we learned through that is like, it does not matter, like, you know, there were so many people that like, it didn't matter how nice you were to them. It didn't matter like any of that. Like, it was just a thing where, you know, I think there are just people have their own things going on, you know.
Yeah.
And I try to be compassionate. I'm like, you know, if this is how much you're trying to hurt somebody else, the pain in you must be very horrific, you know? It must really be aching like bacon in there. Like,
Yeah.
you know, what else do you do? But we got through it,
Yeah.
and, you know, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And it was really special. And I do think that, you know, they ended up doing this thing where, like, his dad and like my dad like got in the pool, because we had a pool, and it was about breaking generational curses off.
Yeah.
And my dad, if you guys ever sees this, but my dad, honestly, he's like a completely different guy today than what he was that day.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, between me praying in the courts and I think kind of that activation that they did that day, you know, it's like we've seen some serious fruit come from that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like all those things combined. And so, yeah, I mean, it came with a lot of warfare. It made things a lot more complicated than what they had to be. It made things where it's like, you know, instead of people being happy for you, like they're mad, they're trying to make life really hard and make you have to make like really intense decisions at a time that's out of season.
Yeah.
But, you know, we made the best choices that we could, and we got through it, you know, came out on the other side, and the goal was achieved. We got married. So,
Yeah.
you know, Jessica.
Yeah, this kiddo is she's having a blast. She is super enticed with the fact that there's a tripod in here and that there's these small spaces that she can switch between.
Right.
And she's eating some Pringles right now. So.
Right. I love how she talks. Like whenever she actually like only makes words, I'll be so sad just because like that's great, but like, I just absolutely love like the baby talk. What is that? I love y'all. Thank you. Yeah, we don't want anything to come off as like, you know.
I think it's just it's a good kind of thing to kind of think about, that everyone's like, you know, what that imagination of what that kingdom spouse like journey is going to look like, is that sometimes, you know, even just making it to where it's something that you guys are together. Like I said, like our engagement was 40 days.
44.
40. Well, it was.
Was it 44?
No, it was 40.
Oh.
It was 40.
Well,
but it was
the
like
same time that Jesus was led into the desert to be tempted.
It was. But, you know, it's that spot of like, you know, sometimes one of the things that we'll actually talk with people, like whenever we're actually kind of like setting realistic expectations, is that, you know, sometimes it's not always about like having this like white picket fence suburbia kind of like lifestyle afterwards, that you know, from the time that we were dating until we got engaged, until we got married, like each time we did, the furnace got hotter. And that was, you know, those things were trying to show up to prevent each step along the way. But it's just kind of a look at saying that, like, you know, some of the like intense warfare that we had in that season was a day that we should be celebrating and picking all the colors and all. We were still having to do those things, but we were also having to figure out living arrangements. We were also have to figure out, like, how are we going to move your stuff out, and childcare, and do all of this other kind of stuff, like
animals.
Leading into
Where
it.
Animals gonna go?
Yeah.
You know.
And then the intense. Oh, and by the way, it's something that's like, you know, you thought you were going to be here till the end of the month, but actually, you know, it's ending like 3 weeks early now because
we couldn't
this
trust
whole invasive
my house
situation.
to not be invaded.
Yeah,
it wasn't
like
that we were
ransacked.
told me to go. We already like paid, but it was like, yeah, if you've already come in and ransacked my home, I can't like leave. I can't leave these things here, right? So we were. It was a pretty intense situation, for sure. Give us another question, babies.
Yeah. So.
Beberenskis. What's Jessica saying?
So the kid is having a time of her life.
Yeah.
And if people want to be offended, they'll find a reason to be offended.
So true.
This one says, I noticed that when you guys reunited, you both spoke the spiritual warfare you both faced becoming one. So how both of you mentally became one when dealing with outer world loved ones attacking you. Can you give us an example of mental challenge both of you have as your own, but tackled it as a team? So mine's becoming one. So.
Yeah. Well, I think.
No.
I think I struggled with a lot of stuff in like the mental part in the beginning because there was so much. Like he probably did, but you wouldn't have known it because he's a man, and so he's like all reserved and like he's already kind of quiet anyway, and so I'm not, as you guys have picked up on, and so yeah, I think we dealt with things together because we pray together a lot. Yeah. Right? So like the mental things that were happening with me, because I was definitely going through them. I mean, we had 2 daughters that were in the mix, right? And we had, you know, everything moved really quickly, which it needed to. Yeah. But then there was also like extra pressure on it, right? Because his mom had been helping him, you know, with the girls, and so we were just doing a whole entire switch around skis. Yeah. And it was a lot. It was a lot to process, and it put a lot of pressure on us. And anything we had going on, it was like it did like that furnace, and it made other things come up, right? Yeah. So we were just dealing with a world of emotions and a world of like things and pressures.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we think about in that part is that, you know, each of us had some of our own things that we didn't have to kind of deal with, but on some of those really like deep-seated issues and things that come from childhood and things that come from like all these other different spaces, like in some areas, like you almost like can't really think to address it whenever everything is still always so hot in your life that you never really have things calm down enough. That, you know, one of the things that we dealt with when we came together was in some cases just giving her a safe space enough to really kind of be able to kind of deal with some of these things that really just needed dealt with, that never had an opportunity in our environment that allowed her to do so. Yeah. And so, you know, in some of our spaces, it was like, you know, you get these triggers and emotional responses from people that do you wrong all throughout your life in any way. And, you know, parentally, maritally, relationally, emotionally, in workplace environments, you have people that kind of like hurt you or cause this spot that like whenever I recognize this aspect, I've always been hurt by this thing kind of previously, that whenever it's in a situation where you're not being like someone's like actively trying to like hide things or shield things from you, sometimes those emotional triggers are still just one of those that they just take being dealt with one at a time. And so in our case, you know, some of the stuff that we were dealing with like kind of together was just kind of providing a space that was safe enough to actually be able to kind of exchange some of those trauma responses for actually healthy ways of dealing with things. And the more times that we did that, the easier it was to kind of address each one of those other future things moving forward. So it's less about, I think it was less about like, is there, you know, are there things that you have to kind of deal with whenever you're separated versus if you deal with things like whenever you can only deal with them when you're together? One of the main things that we talk with people about is that you want to remove as many of those things that could be dealt with just one person. You want to get as many of those dealt with so that the things that you actually do need to deal with, that takes two people to handle it, you don't have this other mountain of things that could have been dealt with kind of previously, but just never had the opportunity for it. So
I think that's a really great way to explain that. And in our coaching sessions, a lot of times I'll say that exactly, like, deal with as much as you can, because there will be certain things you can only deal with together.
Yeah.
Because what that looks like in a single season and maybe multiple single seasons, right? Like maybe you've always just kind of been on your own island. Maybe even when there was people around, but maybe not somebody who's actually like invested in you and they're like looking at you, right? And they are in life situations. And honestly, so like skip to the testimony part, I'm thankful for the seasons where the heat was so applied, because now all of that looks completely different. So let me show you the rainbow, right? Of what kind of waits for you on the other side. It's not this continuous thing, but there were seasons where that heat was so intense that it was burning up everything, like everything, but it all needed to be.
Yeah.
And like he said, it's like now I think we can see the fruit of what that safe space looked like.
Yeah.
Of that place where now it's like you got a safe space to kind of process things, to pray things out, where there's not, it's not that we haven't dealt with like attacks and stuff, but it definitely looks much different. So many access points have been cut off because of the courts of heaven, because of God, right?
Yeah.
Because we cut those permissions off. And so it's like, I always say too, like, you know, deliverance, it's like layers. It's like an onion. You're pulling back layer by layer. When you get one off, another one comes up. You get a little, and it used to seem just like constant, because it was always this work. And it doesn't look like that anymore. And things pop up, like, you know, we'll think through them, pray about them. Every once in a while something kind of happens or whatever that you're like, okay, this isn't right, like this needs to be prayed through.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it was like, you know, when we first came together, it was a pretty constant thing where I just always felt all these things kind of coming to the surface.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just from kind of a lifetime of all those things he was talking about, all these triggers and things of just like people mistreating you and demons having access to your life and familiar spirits and just kind of getting beat up, you know, and only having you to kind of really rely on and like you to kind of pray through these things. And now you have this other person that's like, I care about you and want to help you, you know?
Yeah. When you're always kind of like in that fight or flight mode, it really is kind of hard to, you know, there's that difference between like, you know, in those modes you've got fight or flight, and then you've got to rest and digest. The two of those things don't happen at the same time, but if you're always in that fight or flight mode, you don't really have time to actually deal with and digest some of the things that were actually kind of going on the whole time. And I think that was something that, you know, in some of those areas it took maybe a year and a half of being in a safe place, that you didn't have to always worry about like kind of like where the next thing was coming from, or what this thing, you know, what this next thing was, when that other shoe was going to drop. That now it's actually, it actually kind of gave her a chance to kind of actually process through some things. And I think in those parts, it was something that she was able to process in a few months to a few years, what may have taken years to decades to do in the other kind of situations. So it was, you know, there's parts of it that you just have to kind of realize that everyone's kind of coming to the table with their own experiences, and you have to kind of be aware that that's a spot where it's like, you know, in some areas you can hit the ground running, But in other areas, you just kind of have to let there be a little bit of peace in the moment and kind of let that spot where you kind of resettle into what that looks like. And now the way that we deal with problems is a lot different. You know, what used to have issues come up and we would lose, you know, days to a week or some, you know, in some times of progress in certain areas. Now it's something that's like 30 minutes, maybe 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, but it's minutes and hours instead of days or weeks of kind of like dealing with some of the stuff now. And because we still have stuff that we have to kind of, you know, we have to deal with stuff that's constantly having to kind of be dealt with. You know, we spend all of our time together. You put any two human together, there's going to be some parts where you have to kind of figure out how do you kind of cohabitate and make things work and not drive each other up a wall. But now it's something that, because we don't have all of these other kind of things that are unresolved, and like we don't have to like figure out what each other's thinking all the time and try and like kind of second guess whether or not this means this or that means that or any of the other kind of things, you're actually able to move forward and realize, oh, he sometimes just says stuff that's stupid and it's just what he does, but he doesn't mean anything by it because all of his actions over the last period of time has shown me that this is what that character actually looks like.
Yeah. And I will say, then you kind of dealt with some stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm always dealing with stuff.
I'm like, and let's talk about you, babe. No,
Yeah,
I'm just kidding.
I'm
But the
always
thing
dealing
is
with stuff.
like mine definitely looked much different than his. But then it's like, then you kind of just, you just start.
Yeah. I mean, I have different things, you know, and some of those things were stuff that I kind of brought on myself. Had kind of like a business venture completely fail. It put us like a few days from declaring bankruptcy, and then like a few days after that was something that we were actually debt free and actually had $5,000 in the bank from this like crazy God encounter. But it was like, you know, whenever you're a provider for, you know, for the family as well, I mean, it's just something that's like you've got all these different responsibilities. And so whenever there's crazy stuff happening professionally or crazy stuff happening like in these other kind of circles and hats that you wear, it's kind of hard to kind of keep those separated, that you're still showing up and being present for your family, still being present for your daughters, for your wife, for, you know, for that part of it. That, you know, sometimes it was some of those issues that I had kind of personally ended up kind of getting just stuck on the back burner and not really being dealt with or resolved until it would be something that they would just kind of surface to a point where it's like, okay, we got to stop this because something's not working here. Have to have kind of a come to Jesus moment, and would talk through some stuff, and within like a couple of days we're, you know, kind of back to a good spot and kind of keeping going. But, you know, there's a lot of times when, you know, we each deal with different stuff differently because we are quite opposite of each other in some ways, which is good, because I think both of us would agree that if we had an equal copy of each other under the same roof, I mean, it'd be like, it'd be explosive. It'd be very, be a Tinder bundle. But, you know, we each always have our own set of stuff that's going on separately, but now we've gotten to a point where we both trust each other in that sense of being able to deal with all of our single stuff in that way, that it's a lot easier because you've now got someone who's on your team that has your best interest in mind, that now it's not really something that I rely on friends or peers or relational or parental, or I don't rely on a lot of the other stuff. It's just like our opinion is the only thing of really that kind of matters, and beyond that it really doesn't.
I love that. I think that's so well said, and I wasn't even talking about that. But I like that you brought that up though, because that's a really amazing testimony. And I will say that situation, God completely worked for good in every way, not just the financial part, but He like
I had some rough edges that
it just completely transformed you.
It happened in 9 months, almost to the day.
Right?
It was
A 9-month is
Painful.
definitely like a number for us, but it was so painful, and it was painful to like watch and to like go through too. Like,
Oh, I'm sure I was a mess. I was an
But-
absolute mess. You wouldn't see me in videos for a while. It was a good thing.
Well, you know, it was a lot. You went through a lot,
Yeah.
but you came out on the other side just like so transformed and so much more mature in the Lord,
Yeah.
and so much like steady,
Yeah.
and like
And I needed that.
yeah. And now it's like, I don't know, I think we learned really great financial lessons together,
Bankruptcy will do that.
but we didn't.
We didn't actually hit it, but
Yeah, I mean, it was just
it
the Lord.
it was.
But that would have been it had God not had a miracle for us.
Yeah, that week, the week leading up to this, just to kind of like frame what this actually whole thing looked like, is that we're 8.5 months into a 9-month thing that we didn't know the end date of yet. 8.5 months in, we get a letter that we're being sued. We reach out because we don't have a way to settle it. We reach out and it's an equipment loan that we've been trying to get off the ground now for months. It wasn't working. Every contract was failing. Everything was just a disaster from start to finish. But 8.5 months in, we're getting sued. We reach out to a bankruptcy attorney. We set an appointment for 2 weeks. We have a conversation with the bank's attorney, who is basically saying that, you know, these are your options for your chapter filings. They weren't even our attorney, but like, these are your options for bankruptcy chapters. And then we get another letter saying that we've got a court date the following week on Monday. Wednesday, we get an offer to actually have someone buy all of our equipment at our asking price. We settled with the bank the following week. We drove up and dropped off the equipment and set everything up for them in that part of it, but ended up settling for less than what we actually sold the equipment for, and actually made money off the entire process, canceled the bankruptcy, came out, was actually able to pay off all of our credit cards at the time, and then had our tax returns come back. And it was everything that happened so quickly, but in about 2 weeks' time, we went from absolutely devastation to absolute mountaintop. And
That's awesome.
it was awesome in that part of it, but
It's just gone.
8.5 months of being pretty much worn down every single day, feeling like you're failing, everything is falling apart, nothing is working. I mean, it wasn't without like every effort.
And that
you're
was
putting
the
in.
first year of having a baby.
Yeah.
It was right, we sold it right before her first birthday. And so we're like sleep deprived, going through all of this, have a new family member, and it was just incredible how God came through for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's like, sometimes God's
And it
time
changed
does
us.
not look like our time.
And it changed us for the better. Like
Yeah, we're completely different.
we're completely different, and it brought us way closer, and yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, and then it said, you know, prior to marriage, did you go through a season that you were too disappointed to pray for your husband?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I want to say my walk with the Lord prior to that, I didn't really have times where I had times where I was just like exhausted from just like living the Christian life because of taking care of my brother and everything that entailed. I worked multiple jobs. Like I always, sure. Thanks, baby. Good night, my love. Good night, my love. Mwah, you sleep good. Say your prayers with me.
All right.
Okay. But yeah, so as far as feeling like, I remember when I first started doing the warfare prayers, like, right, you know, kind of, I know, just like when I just kind of first started out with the Lord, like after like my brother and I kind of got established, I would read these warfare prayers out loud on my porch every morning. And I remember there was a part in there talking about like, and then talking about like protecting my husband. And I remember stopping and being like, Lord, I don't have a husband. So I don't know if I should pray that part or not. What are you looking for, baby?
That's fine.
Diaper bag, I think. Maybe the side pocket. But, you know, it was stuff like that where it was like I was always exhausted, but never really super disappointed. And so I actually started praying that every day. And that was kind of one of the things where check her top drawer.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm looking for a passage. But so it's just kind of one of those things where it's like I was always exhausted and always kind of like running on E, but always super hopeful for whatever God had. So it wasn't that I was always like thinking about like a husband, but I wanted God's will. And I got to a point where once like I had gotten like into like my new house and everything, and it kind of like overcome like some of those mountains where it was like okay, like really feeling established in what I'm doing. That was whenever, you know, I remember kind of giving that more of more attention of like really wanting, you know, Lord, you know, really like to be married and have some kids, you know, like, and so it was one of those things where that started to come up again, but it was always framed in a way of Lord, if it's not your will, it's okay. And that's how I felt about it. Like I just was super like I know that I just always put God first. Like, Lord, if it's your will, I want to get married and have kids. I don't think you would have given me that desire if you didn't have it for me. But if you don't have it for me, like it's okay. And that's just kind of how it was. So I didn't spend an overabundance of time of praying for a husband. It was just like in my prayer time sometimes I would feel like, you know, Lord, let's talk about that a little bit. And it was so funny because before he wanted to talk to me about it, it was literally like if I would bring it up, it was like he left the room. There would be such a shift in the environment that like I really did think for a while that he didn't have that for me because it would literally be like I would bring up a husband and it was like I would hear his footsteps like walk away and close a door and just walk out. And it was like it was so tangible that like he wasn't talking to me about it. I was like, okay, well maybe that's not your plan, but I was like, you know, I have to be okay with what you do regardless, because no matter what, I'm going to serve you. No matter what, I'm going to keep doing what you're telling me to do. So it was just a little different for me. I just don't feel like I ever just felt. I only felt disappointed in it when he told me that that was my husband, and then like nothing was happening. Then I definitely felt butthurt, and I just kind of like felt sad, and I was like, I don't like how this feels. I'd rather just not do this, you know. So hope that answers that question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another
I had more in the pit of despair, kind of in that side of it, where mine was something that I didn't find out when until it was like a few months before it was happening. So right around the time that that God reconfirmed that you're going to get married soon was around probably around the same time that he told me of like when she was going to be here by. But at that point, I mean, that was something that's like when you deal with like faith to such an extent where you're kind of like on this hairline of like, do I have any way of being able to kind of like maintain enough faith to kind of keep going in that part of it? Not that it was like doubting the fact that God was good or the fact that anything to have to do with like salvation topics in that part of it, but it was just something like every bit of faith that I had kind of allowed myself to have in this kind of like future season, whenever it was kind of coming through the holiday months where it was still something that's like, you know, 6 months in still at this point, was I didn't have any timeline or a date or any of that kind of part of it. It was just something that's like just these images kind of like whenever I was praying of like what that was going to look like, and it was almost painful in a sense because it was something that it felt like it was like, you know, I had only been seeing in the courts of heaven for a couple months kind of previous to this. And so it was like at some part I was kind of even battling with the fact of like, am I even dealing with my own thoughts? Is this something that God's actually saying anything? Am I actually hearing any of these words that I'm hearing in this part? And so it's like there was kind of a little bit of like a more of an internal struggle of like, what the heck is actually happening here? Because it was a completely different part of it. But I remember barely just having enough faith to kind of get into that around February, right? Probably around where this was, a couple of years ago, was right around the time frame of when I was basically saying like, I don't know if I can keep going, and that's whenever it was. He was basically saying she'll be here by the last day of spring on the Jewish calendar. So,
And that was.
and she was on the last day of spring on the Jewish calendar.
Isn't that
so
cool?
it's pretty neat. But it was. It was things like that up until the point where I had really kind of given up on my own strength in that part of it. That's whenever God kind of spoke to me. But the it was just something that's like each person has their own walk. Like I said, I didn't even know about Kingdom Spouse until I was one, until this was like months in, whenever she was actually we were going through her journals, and she was talking about this promise, and we're like wow, that's awesome. And then come to find out there was like a name for it. I was like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I was one of those. But here we are. So in a way of it, it's kind of a spot where it's like you just have to kind of figure out that if you've got the promise and you've heard from God and you've heard that way in that part of it, in some part of it, you just kind of have to say, like, if it's something that you're really wanting God to do this, just kind of be ready for some kind of bumps along the way. But it's something that's like the part that you definitely don't need to worry about is making it all own happen in your own strength. That's kind of, I think, where a lot of my faith kind of got hit pretty hard in that process. Wasn't because God wasn't good, but was because I was trying to help God's plan come to fruition, and God didn't need my help. And so whenever I would have a failed not even relationship, I mean, it's like just like basically failed encounters, or I'd get back on the dating apps or something, something simple, just trying to try and help God figure it out in that part of it. I would always find myself worse off than where I started. And each time that it would be something that I'd be on for like 2 weeks and then realize that like, oh, this person's not here, or it would just be, like something that I would reach out in some way, and then it'd be completely, shut down because it would be closed doors. And I would take that as a personal offense, because that was something that by the time we hit February, I thought I'd already messed it up. And one of the things that kind of led up to being delayed even just a little bit beyond that date that he told me was because it said, if I've already messed this up, I don't want to mess up things for her, even if it was if it's something that you don't kind of help me kind of clear some of these things up in what you've told me in that part of it. I would, I don't know how I can kind of continue with it. And he did within a very short period of time. It was something that was all cleared up and we were good to go. But it can be a roller coaster. It really can.
Yeah. That's awesome, baby. I'm glad you made it.
Glad I made it too.
It's awesome. And I'm really thankful that we have the testimony that we have, and so many of you guys are working on it right now. Yours is coming. But it is really neat to have that, because it's a thing that neither one of us could have done it on our own. I wasn't on any dating app. I wasn't going anywhere to meet anyone. Had God not just completely orchestrated that and showed me and brought me to a place, where there he was, and then had the grace, just the kindness to speak to me about it and to let me in on his plan for my life. It's amazing that God's so kind to do that and to say, of course I care about this part of your life. I've cared about everything else. Why would I not care about your happiness and, having children and doing all of these things? Of course I care about it. Yeah. But I think it comes from caring about what he cares about first. And then he's like, yeah, let me, it's like, you see his generosity whenever you're like, I'll lay it all down for you, Lord. If you need somebody, send me. I'll do it, and you do that for a few seasons, and then he's like, hey, guess what? I'm about to pour some stuff out on you, awesome stuff. Doesn't mean that the enemy's not going to want to attack it, because he is, but I got you, but it's just neat, and I'm just very thankful that we have that testimony to share. And I think it's awesome what God has done.
Sure.
What was that? Hi, Krista. Do you have Was that the last one I came?
Yeah, it was the one that was asking, do you have any prayer strategies for spirit husbands and ancestral spirits?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the thing is when you go in the courts of heaven, obviously it's repenting for you and repenting on behalf of your bloodline, and then cutting off all the permissions that the enemy has had.
Yeah.
Right. Another really important thing that I think has helped in a lot of ways, to the extent we will never really know until we're in heaven, but is tearing down the altars of your family members as well as you. So like any things that any sin offerings you've made to a false deity, that like your worship, your praise, like your body, things of that nature that were sacrificed, right?
Yeah.
Given over to something that was not the Lord, right? It's really important that we repent for that and we tear those altars down, and we kind of sanctify those places as well. So it's like something you kind of just go through, and you go, in your prayer time, going to places, letting God bring things to your remembrance, and making sure those altars do not exist, because those do speak against you.
Yeah.
Those still have power, and they do still have a voice, and they do have to be torn down. And so that would be really important stuff. Also, making sure that you repent on behalf of your ancestors for Freemasonry, witchcraft, things of that nature, because usually on down the line somebody's involved in those things, and those things are really intense, right? And it's just something you really want to make sure that the blood of Jesus is covering that, and that the accuser of the brethren is not able to keep bringing that against you. And and then just asking God, to judge every familiar spirit, anything that's attached to you, that's in you, right? Judge it and remove it, and believe that you've received that. And a lot of times you may feel something completely different immediately, but you will, as you walk this out, and as God keeps bringing stuff to you, you keep going after it. It's like week after week, you're gonna start to notice like things changing, and you start to change, and your emotions start to change, and all of a sudden, things that were always like, even like tormenting thoughts or things like that, things you just could not quite get a control on. All of a sudden, you're like, wow, I don't deal with that anymore. Yeah. I think also identity is huge. I think once you understand your identity in Christ, I think that also removes a lot of just kind of the mental bondage that we can get caught in, that the enemy can get us caught in, where it's like just like repetitious thoughts, or like anxieties or fears and things like that. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was trying to remember, how did God deliver me from that? But it's really your identity in Him that delivers you from some of those things. I mean, some of that stuff you do have to pray through. But when you've prayed every prayer there is to pray, and you're still dealing with stuff where you're like, something's taking up rent-free space in my head and I'm not okay with it, you're like, okay, it's an identity issue. Because when you know who you are in Christ, and you are the only one, you're the only version of you that God ever made, right? And what God has for you to do, nobody else can do. There's just something so special about understanding like Christ in you. Yeah. And what He does in you and through you. And when you really get grounded in that, and that's only by submitting to His will and doing it. Yeah. Like that's where that comes from. You really, it really silences what's going on in your head, because you don't have all this warring information. Yeah. That's saying, no, you're this, you're that, or you'll never be this, you'll never be that. And you're like, not really worried about you. You're not paying rent, get out. Yeah. Like, you don't belong here, and it actually like, so that is really where that deliverance comes from. Yeah. Is walking out your identity. Great to see everyone. Oh, it's Faithia. What's up? Thank you so much. You're welcome. I'm going nowhere either. Satan makes marriages. And praying against. So, how would you recommend praying against a counterfeit situation and avoiding comparison? The whole thing just feels odd. For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think the comparison thing is that goes back to identity. And knowing things that to stay away from things that are meant to tear you down, right? So being very cautious with social media, right? You have to always make sure that whatever you're doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
So it's not saying don't do it at all, but it's saying if you feel triggered whenever you get on social media, certain apps, because of the content that's there, because it makes you kind of tap into your flesh instead of walking in the spirit, veer away from it. Make sure you're like, learn what triggers you in a negative way and start doing the opposite. So that would be one thing, because when you start walking in the flesh, comparison is pretty much inevitable. So you really kind of have to say, okay, how do I walk in the spirit? How do I look at things that feed the spirit? How do I get in alignment with things of the spirit? And just kind of get away from this stuff that always makes you think flesh.
Here's the part about a counterfeit that most people don't think about, is that the worse the counterfeit, the easier it is to tell it apart. If my toddler draws a picture of a $1 bill or a $100 bill, let's just say a $100 bill, and she draws a picture of a $100 bill on a piece of paper and then holds it up, and then I go and try and cash that at the bank, it's a pretty easy counterfeit to notice that that wasn't something that was really meant to happen that way. But if you look at what master forgers look like, whenever it's something that you're saying on the surface, this looks and appears, it has all the right things, but whenever an expert looks at that counterfeit, it is very easy for them to say, there are parts of this that don't match the historical part of what this document should look like. There are parts of this situation that do not line up, and there are parts that have question marks on whether or not this is actually valid or not. If you have discernment, you can easily pick up a counterfeit.
Yeah.
But if your first intention is to say, they've got 80% and I can change the other 20, that is by far a counterfeit. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't play with it. You will get burnt. It will confuse you. It will deceive you. It will look and smell, and it will have every single part of it that looks like you could have something to turn it into something that God promised. But there will be a part of it that your spirit has been telling and screaming to you on the inside that there is just something off about this.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a part where a lot of people are going to say, like, he ticks all of my boxes, or she ticks all of my boxes, except this one little detail. And I mean, like, to some people that detail can be like monumental, but I said, in this part, is this something that I really care about? If it's 90% there, I can tell you it's a counterfeit. Don't do it.
Yeah, everything, you have to have peace. And the thing is like, yeah, I'm actually really grateful. I see what God was doing. I'm actually grateful that his process involved like counterfeit encounters, because God was teaching him discernment. God was teaching him a gift that is, you have to learn. And that was really like, after all the attack that he went through and like all of the, like, I'm going to destroy you. That was kind of like that. I can see how God really was like, I'm going to use this situation to really sharpen this part of you that you have to have as a believer. You have to have discernment. You have to know to listen to it. When you do not have peace, when that one little thing pops up, that's because the God's letting the enemy show himself.
Yeah.
And if you ignore that one little thing and say, I can fix it, you can't fix it. It can't be fixed.
Yeah.
And you are ignoring the Holy Spirit's prompting, and you're going with something because you think it can work. And it's like, it can't. And God wants you to know it can't. And that's why it'll be good. And then the enemy falls out of line and he says something and it doesn't match and it doesn't make sense. And it completely cuts through you like a knife. And you're like, oh man, this would have been so great, but you're so wrong, you know? But I'm glad he had that experience, because I already had that. And he needed that. Everybody needs that. And so I'm glad that God sharpened that skill prior to us getting together. Or that would have been a battle for us, because mine's pretty on point, right? And so it's like, we needed that to be equally yoked, if that makes sense.
There's a spot, and it's not really something like until you actually think about it, that A counterfeit will always try to prove to you that it has a place to stand in your promise. And it will always try to convince you that everything is exactly as it should. I had a counterfeit tell me a dream that was mine. She finished a dream that I had that another prophet had confirmed. Had the same dream, never told anybody about it. That's how kind of tricky this can be. That if it's something that you're like, oh my God, this person gave me this person told me, they finished, they had the same prophetic dream that I had. I
Only,
told her all about it.
yeah, the only thing was that
It had one extra part, and it was the ending.
And that was how the enemy showed himself, and
Yeah.
that was when his discernment went off, and that's when he knew she was a liar.
Yeah.
And that's awesome, right? Because that's how you find out when it's not from God,
Mhm.
is whenever everything's kosher, and then all of a sudden he says something just twisted enough where you're like, and everything, all the bells in you go off,
Yeah.
and you're like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to have courage, and you have to walk away, and you have to say, I do not care what this aftermath looks like. I am not gonna walk
Mhm.
hand in hand with the devil. Like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
This is God telling me that this is a lie, and I cannot be in agreement with it.
And there was a part that was like that. Whenever it was coming close to that, whenever it was coming close to the end of that day, coming up to the end of spring, which is the promised date that I had for whenever my kingdom spouse was going to be here, there was a trip that I took with a friend to Arkansas, and we ran into, in the whole entire state, we ran into this counterfeit again, and it was at a part where there was a moment where I realized that was the best attempt that the enemy had to dissuade me, to take me off this course, was trying to reintroduce this counterfeit one more time. And it was something that whenever I realized that was the best counterfeit that the enemy had in that way, it was something that I had tremendous peace. Because I realized if I can say no to the best counterfeit of what Satan can show in all of these in all of these characteristics aspects, if everything that the best of what Satan can do to present a counterfeit is something that I will still say I say no to that, it made it to where it was actually the really big turning point that happened. It happened about a week before this whole barbecue went down, when it was it was something that I realized this is very easy to say no to, because now there is never going to be a counterfeit that Satan can present to me between now and this deadline that I've got from God. There's not a single counterfeit that is going to dissuade me from my purpose in this part of it. And it was very freeing in that way. But yes, a counterfeit is there's gonna be just that one part where they're trying to oversell you on the fact that they should be there. And it's gonna be that one thing that really kind of makes it to where you're like, your spirit is going to be re-highlighting, well, why is it just that one, like, why is it that one thing that just kind of keeps popping up systematically? And it's your spirit telling you it's counterfeit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we are probably going to start closing this up.
Yeah, sounds
But we thank everybody who came on and was with us tonight. And I'm really thankful that you were able to be here. I appreciate your presence. It's awesome. And your insight. Everybody really, really values that, because it's so interesting to not only have the testimony from what this looks like on the other side, but also the male's perspective, and get both. And I think I know that so many people tell us just like how valuable that is. And so we're just so thankful to be able to be a part of that journey and be able to help in any way. Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah.
And yeah, we love you guys super big. And if anybody is wanting to book a coaching session with me, I will put all of those links down below.
Yeah.
Give me a few minutes to for this to load, and then I'll put that down in the bottom. And also, I forgot, we just want to thank everybody that gave to Jason's GoFundMe because we met his goal within like 7 hours.
Yeah.
So we've already paid in full for his dental surgery, which is incredible. And so we just want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We are just just so excited to be able to have that done for him.
Yeah.
And him not have to wait and not have to, it's just incredible. It's a huge step in his journey, and we're just so grateful. So thank you, everybody that helped. You guys are amazing. We love you super big, and we will talk to you soon.
Sounds great.
Bye.